Welcome back to the Battle Camp. So I made a video earlier on today with regards to Tyson Fury and the deal that he signed with ESPN over in the States. So go and check on my channel. You can click on that video and have a watch of that. During the same press conference that BT were having with all the kind of lineup of boxers and what they're going to be doing over the next year, Billy Joe Saunders came to the stage, and they announced that Billy Joe Saunders will face a gentleman by the name of Shefat Isufi, who's a Germany-based Serbian fighter for the vacant WBO super middleweight title in Wembley, which is in London, in April. So obviously we all know that there was an announcement by the WBO a couple of weeks ago where they mandated Billy Joe Saunders to be the challenger for the middleweight championship and to face Andrade. So hold on, I'm getting a little bit confused here. Let me start again. So Billy Joe Saunders was the mandatory challenger to Andrade's WBO title. We all know what happened in that situation where Billy Joe Saunders failed a wider drugs test, and so his initial title fight where he was a champion and Andrade was the mandatory challenger, that fight fell through. Subsequently, Andrade faced some guy whose name I can't remember at the moment, and won the belt. And then after that, WBO mandated Billy Joe Saunders as the challenger. So obviously now that fight isn't happening because Billy Joe Saunders has chosen to go up a weight class to the super middleweight division. So he's not going to operate permanently, but for this fight he's going to be at 168 pounds, and he's going to fight this dude Shefat Isufi. So a couple of things with this. Firstly, I don't know how these rankings work, but for Billy Joe Saunders to be up there in the rankings at super middleweight and to be facing Isufi for the WBO title, is that just the WBO making things sweet with Billy Joe Saunders because of how things played out with regards to his drugs test and the kind of I don't want to say inaccuracies, or the inconsistencies, I suppose is a better word, with regards to how that happened, because according to the British Drug Testing Board, he passed that drugs test. It was just WADA that flagged him. So there was a bit of a back and forth on that front, and so that led to Billy Joe Saunders relinquishing his title. So we all know what happened. I've made a video about this previously. So the situation we ended up with was Andrade being the champion and Saunders being the challenger, which meant the purse splits were flipped around. And so in the previous video I kind of said that there was a chance that Billy Joe Saunders wouldn't be taking that fight because he'd be making considerably less money than he did than he was going to make for the fight before the drugs test issue happened. So what my initial thoughts were came true. He's chosen not to take that fight, and he's going to be fighting at a weight class higher again for a WBO title. So is that WBO just kind of making things right with Billy Joe Saunders, putting him up in the rankings and putting him in a position to win another version of the world title belt? Does that make sense? In terms of Billy Joe Saunders and this move for his career, what does it mean? Firstly, my initial reaction is I don't really even think he's a very big middleweight fighter at 160 pounds. I feel like he can actually, if he kind of ate right and got the right nutrition and trained the right way and didn't blow up between fights and camps, he could probably operate at 154 pounds. He's not really one of these guys that are ripped and kind of big for the weight class and someone that needs to lose a lot of weight and steps on the scales and then rehydrates and goes up in weight on the day of the fight. He seems to kind of, it feels like he fights at the weight that he should be walking around at 160 pounds. So that's a little bit, it's not a concern, it's just a bit of a side note in my personal point of view, because he's going up another weight division, so he's going to be fighting at 168 pounds. What does that mean for him in terms of how his body's going to perform at that weight class, and kind of just him in terms of his mentality, going through fight camp, having that extra weight that he doesn't have to shift, etc. Does that mean he's going to train as hard as he usually does? I don't know. I personally don't really think he is a super middleweight. The absolute maximum he should be fighting at is at middleweight, 160 pounds. So him moving up is just a way of him collecting a world championship, I believe, because I think he should beat this guy Shefat Sufi. Not that I know much about him. I hadn't heard of him before today, and I looked at his box rec, and the only thing that really kind of stands out is the fact that he fought at higher weight classes and he lost to Anthony Yard previously. So he should win this fight comfortably, just on paper. With me not knowing much about Isufi, if he was a real threat, I sincerely doubt that they would be taking this fight. So that kind of, where does that leave Billy Joe Saunders in the kind of in the names at 160 pounds? So we obviously know we got Andrade, who's a champion, Jacobs and Canelo, who are both champions, who are going to be fighting each other at Cinco de Mayo on the Zone. So where does that leave Billy Joe Saunders in the mix? The answer is I don't know. Is he even concerned? Does he care? Is he literally just trying to have fights now where he can make the most money? It sounded like in an interview that he did with Michelle Joy Phelps, which I made a video about previously, it sounded like he was really focused and energized and ready to take his career by the scruff of the neck, and he was kind of more about proving how good he is and proving his worth in that weight division. And obviously I kind of misunderstood or misread what he was saying in that video, in that interview. So I'm a little bit disappointed, if I'm totally honest. I don't obviously, you know, he it's okay. So I suppose one way of looking at things is um a positive, I suppose, is he can win a legitimate world title, and he can be a two-weight champion, which is obviously good for his legacy, etc. And that can kind of give him, I suppose, a bit more leverage when he's negotiating with, you know, the likes of Andrade, Canelo, Jacobs, Triple G. If there was, if you know, if they're negotiating a fight at 160 pounds, because that's where I want to see him, man. I want to see how good he is at that weight class. And I suppose maybe having a world title at super middleweight can help him with that negotiation, if that makes sense, or with kind of the leverage that he's going to have when coming to the table to kind of agree a deal to make a fight at 160 pounds. I mean, it can't hurt him being a world champion at 168 pounds. So I suppose that's a positive, but the negative for me is it kind of removes him from the picture. He had an opportunity to fight Andrade. I know it would have been for a lot less money than he was initially due to make when they were due to fight the first time around. But that for me would have been more of a legacy thing. That would have been a bigger legacy fight for me, to fight Andrade and beat Andrade and prove he's definitely at the top of the 160-pound division. And it would have left him nicely poised because Jacobs and Canelo are fighting in the not too distant future, and it would have given him a legit opportunity to kind of call for a fight with one of those, or with the winner of that fight. But now he's kind of removed himself from the equation a little bit, I feel. And for me, that's disappointing, because I want to see, like I've said previously, I want to see the best fight the best. And I was just looking at who the current champions are at super middleweight. So, you know, you've got Canelo, who's a champion at 168 pounds. So that fight can, I suppose, be made at either weight class. Should Canelo beat Jacobs, or should he lose to Jacobs? That's an option. Um, and then you got Callum Smith, who's a kind of a name in the UK, but is that really a big name in the boxing world in terms of proving himself to be the best in a weight class? I don't know. Also, Callum Smith is a big super middleweight, and I think there'll be a massive size difference between Billy Joe Saunders and Callum Smith. And they mentioned Callum Smith in that press conference that I'm referring to earlier. The other names they mentioned were James DeGale and Chris Eubank Jr. So obviously they're fighting this weekend coming. and I'll be at that fight, so I'm looking forward to that. So then those two guys are fighting, and they mention the winner of that fight. But I don't really care about that fight, if I'm totally honest. It doesn't interest me because it doesn't prove anything. Um, Billy Joe Saunders is an undefeated fighter, and he's he's worked so hard to get to a level at 160 pounds where his name is being mentioned along the sides of the best in that division. And you know, having a domestic fight against DeGale or Eubank, that's what it will be. It won't be a fight on the world stage where people are going to sit up and take notice and say, bloody hell, if Billy Joe Saunders was to beat either of those guys, people aren't going to turn around and say, fuck me, he's genuinely one of the best. It doesn't prove anything for me personally. James DeGale, you know, from what people are saying, and it remains to be seen, James DeGale is, you know, coming to the end of his career, and people are saying he isn't what he used to be. He's kind of, his best days have gone past him. And Chris Eubank Jr. is someone that has kind of stepped up and not succeeded when he has stepped up against Billy Joe Saunders and George Groves. So if Chris Eubank wins, people are just going to say, oh, you know, James DeGale wasn't himself and that's why he won. And if James DeGale wins, it's like, oh, well, he was supposed to win because Chris Eubank always fails when he steps up. So Billy Joe Saunders winning that, Billy Joe Saunders fighting the winner of that fight, what does that mean? What does that prove? Nothing to me personally, apart from it just being a good domestic fight in the UK. And fair play to him. If this is kind of how he's going to make the most money and whatnot, then I can't hold it against him, because at the end of the day, that's what these guys are. It's their job. So in any walk of life, when you're doing a job, you want to be paid the most you can for that job. So I'm not having a go. I'm not hating on Billy Joe Saunders for choosing to step up, because presumably he's making more money fighting for this vacant title rather than facing Andrade at middleweight. But it's just, as a fan, it's disappointing because I want to see Billy Joe Saunders fight the best and prove himself. And it looks like he's moving away from that, unfortunately, for me as a fan, which is a shame, I think. I don't know. Obviously, you know, we'll have to wait and see what happens on April 13th, which incidentally is the date that Joshua was going to have at Wembley, and now Billy Joe Saunders is fighting on April 13th at Wembley, but obviously not the stadium, the arena. So that's a bit of a that's a bit ironic, isn't it? Ironic. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Is it a good move for Billy Joe Saunders? Is this kind of him tapering his career down and just kind of trying to get paydays, or is this a good move for him? Is this a move that shows that or if he wins this fight in April, does this put him in a better position to fight a Canelo, Andrade, or someone else? Let me know what you guys think. Comment below. Share this with your mates. Hit the like button and please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of March, and I'm well on the way. And I'd appreciate if you guys could show a little bit of support by hitting that subscribe button, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.